If you've been curious about manual espresso makers for a while, you know that in the recent years the discussion has mainly been, should you get the Cafelat robot or the Flair espresso maker? Today I'm going to try to answer that question for you.
From you breathing in and out of my...
Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Asa from the Coffee Chronicler, and today I'm going to help you decide between these two espresso makers. Right off the bat, I want to say that they both make great espresso. I've had them for a while, and once you learn how to use them, you can get some really great tasting shots. Of course, you need good beans, you need a good grinder, and you need to know what you're doing. That's really the basics, but if you got that down, then yeah, you can make good espresso. Today we're going to compare these two devices. I assume that you roughly know how they're both working and what's included in the box, so I'm not going to go into all that. Instead, I'm going to talk about workflow, design, cleaning, preheating, and all these kind of small details that make a difference in daily use. Of course, I'm also going to talk about which one I would recommend and which one I think represents the best value. The first thing we're going to talk about is preheating. Preheating is something that should be on your mind if you're considering a manual espresso maker. Temperature stability is important when it comes to espresso, or any kind of coffee for that matter. But with electric ones, you have already built in a boiler, you have a group head, and you have electricity to kind of like keep that water circulating and keep the machine hot. With a manual espresso maker, you have to add hot water from your kettle, so suddenly preheating becomes a lot more important. One of the things many people have mentioned about the Flair espresso maker is that it needs a thorough preheating, whereas the robot doesn't really need it to the same extent. This is also the same I've experienced in the time I've had these two devices. If you don't preheat the Flair, you kind of like experience some sour shots. They're not really that sweet, whereas you can definitely get away with not preheating the robot, especially if you're brewing more traditional darker roasts. Now I'm just gonna make a little experiment to see how much it actually matters in daily use. Here I have a kettle of water straight off the boil, and now I'm gonna pour it into the brew head and we'll see how much it drops in temperature. So right now the ambient temperature is 82 Fahrenheit and 28 degrees Celsius. Now I'm gonna add the water and we'll see. So now we're at 75 degrees Celsius and 167 Fahrenheit. It seems it's found a temperature equilibrium around here, and it's actually slightly dropping now. Now we're down to 73 degrees Celsius and 162 degrees Fahrenheit. So that means if you were to brew espresso without preheating, you would be brewing at these kind of temperatures, which wouldn't be suitable for espresso. You can probably get away with preheating only once if you're brewing more traditional dark roasts, but if you're brewing anything modern, then you would probably need to preheat it twice. Okay, now let's see how the robot is doing when it comes to preheating. The robot uses a different system. So instead of having a separate basket and brew head, they actually just use one oversized basket, and that fits both purposes. I'm gonna pour it in, should be very close to a boil. Okay, and now it's full. And now we're at 85 degrees Celsius / 188 Fahrenheit, 190 Fahrenheit, 88 Celsius, which is a little bit on the lower side if you're brewing a modern kind of espresso. But if you're doing anything more traditional, this would be acceptable. So you wouldn't need to preheat the robot. Okay, but enough talking. I think the easiest way to see the difference between these two devices is by actually brewing some coffee. Pretty good. Okay, as you can see, the brewing with the Flair is not that difficult, but the cleaning represents a little bit of a challenge. Next up, I'm going to try to brew with the robot so you can see the difference. Temp. Add the screen. Left arms. And we're done. Okay, that was the shot, and now let's take a look at how the cleaning works. So, press out the water of the and when you see the bubbles, you know there's almost nothing left. Lift up the arm. And then when you check out the portafilter, it's important that you kind of tilt it slightly, and then it will come off like this. Take the arm, wipe if you need. And then puck comes out like this. You can see it's more flat puck, but there's a little bit in the basket, a little rinse, and then it's out. Same thing with the screen. And then you can just take this to the sink, rinse it off. Okay, so now let's talk about the pros and cons of each of the devices. So about the Flair, I think it looks very nice. Definitely wouldn't be out of place in most kitchens. And the form factor is a plus as well. It's pretty small and you can fold it up, take it apart. Obviously it makes some tasty espresso, which is also a big plus. I think overall you get a lot of satisfaction out of pressing out the shots this way with the long lever. You can really lean over and get a lot of leverage going on. Overall, I think it's also made of quality materials all the way around. I like the pressure gauge. It's very responsive, so you have a good idea about how much pressure you're applying to the brewer. Another thing I've enjoyed with the Flair is that there's a very engaged user community on Facebook. You can find the group Brew with Flair, and there's a bunch of people who are very enthusiastic, who have a lot of geeky hacks. So what don't I like about the Flair? Well, preheating is a bit annoying. I don't mind to preheat once, but if you have to preheat 2 or 3 times, it starts to get a little bit annoying. Second, there are a lot of different parts that you have to assemble, and that kind of workflow is a little bit annoying, especially in the morning before you had your first caffeine. Also, all these parts are held together by silicone gaskets, which is a little bit annoying because you kind of like have to massage them into place. As they get a bit older, they get more difficult to assemble. So that's another thing to keep in mind. One annoying thing I've also experienced several times with the Flair is that when you release the pressure of the lever, the basket and the group head will come apart slightly, which means that water will actually flow out from the sides and land in your freshly brewed espresso. So if you've been using a lot of time and care to pull an espresso shot, it's pretty annoying when hot water runs directly into it. So the basket and the brew head are held together with a silicone gasket, and I find that in real life it represents some challenges. The last thing I don't particularly like is that everything is kind of small. So like the basket and the funnel here is kind of like pretty easy to get some ground stuck on the table when you're making coffee. Now let's talk about the robot. So what do I like about this device? Well, I think it looks pretty cool, especially in this white color here. I wasn't really a big fan of the old versions in green and blue, but this cream colored one here just looks amazing. I like the coffee that it produces. I've had some really great shots from it, and I think it does a great job in that department, which is the most important thing. Overall, the user experience is quite nice. I like the feeling of pressing down. You have a good tactile response, and you can feel like how small changes in the pressure affects the flow rate. It's very responsive. I like that there are fewer parts compared to the Flair, and because there are no silicone gaskets, it doesn't like you're involved in some kind of Lego project. So it's just pretty easy and straightforward. Then I also like that the cleaning is very easy. It's not really something I've been bothered about doing. And finally, I just like that it has a 58mm basket, which makes it more like a real espresso machine. In real life, this basket means that the puck is thinner, which again means that it's more responsive to pressure. You can grind finer, you get a little bit more texture and mouthfeel. So the first thing I don't like is that this dispersion screen here is very fragile. In the box there's an extra dispersion screen, but I already ruined one, and I'm a little bit worried that this could happen to this one as well. It's easy to bend it out of shape. They're sold pretty cheap on Cafelat's website, but it's something to keep in mind. For a while I also didn't like how you take out the portafilter. The basket would tend to get stuck on the piston here. I finally learned that you have to tilt it when you take it out, and then it will come out perfectly. So that's not really a con, that's just me didn't reading the instructions properly. Another thing I'm not a huge fan of are these hands here. They look very cute, but when you really have to exert a lot of force, they tend to be a little bit painful to use. The last thing I don't love about the robot is the price. When you get the model with the pressure gauge here, it starts to become pretty expensive for what it is. For the same money, you're starting to get close to some nice semi-automatic machines, so that's something to consider as well. So which one should you get for yourself at home? Well, I think there's not really any doubt that the workflow and the cleaning is a little bit easier and nicer with the robot. So if you're planning to brew espresso every single day and you just want to get the best, then I think you'd be more happy with the robot. That being said, I think there's still a case to be made for the Flair. For instance, the robot has a 58mm portafilter, and to get the best out of this, you really need a dedicated espresso grinder. If you just have a Baratza, Encore or Premium manual grinder, you're not going to get the full benefit out of the robot. The 58mm basket does require a finer grind, and if you're planning to grind that with a hand grinder, it's going to be a lot of work. So I would actually say if you're not going to brew espresso every single day and you just want to experiment a little bit once in a while, then the Flair espresso maker is still a very good option. The difference in shot quality between these two devices isn't massive. If you're on a budget, you can't afford an espresso grinder, you already got something decent at home, then I think the Flair could be a good option for you. You can get away with using a little bit of a coarser grind and still get good results. Whereas with the robot, I feel like you're signing yourself up for a more demanding espresso package. So the robot is already quite a bit more expensive, and if you're gonna add an espresso grinder to that, we're getting close to $800 to $1,000. If you just want to have a little bit of espresso in your life and you don't really want to invest that much, then I think you could take a look at the Flair. This is the Flair Pro we have here, but you can even consider the Flair Signature, which pulls some pretty similar shots and is even cheaper. So I think it's also a matter of how much espresso are you going to make. Are you going to make espresso shots all the time? Then get the robot. If you just want to have a shot now and then I think there's still a good case to be made for the Flair. The robot is currently sold for $370 at the Cafelat website. On top of that, you'll have to factor in shipping and probably duty depending on where you live. They're sent from Hong Kong, so you're probably looking to add another $100 on top of that price. You can also get the robot from Prima Coffee, and they're currently sold for around $449 US. But of course, this is just my opinion about these two espresso makers. I'd be curious to know what you think. Have you tried any of them or both? Let me know in the comment section and we can discuss more about manual espresso or the robot and the Flair. I also just published a review of the robot over on my blog, so I'd encourage you to check that out if you're really considering buying one for yourself. Okay, that's it for now, guys. If you like comparison videos like this, then be sure to leave a like so I know that's what you're into. Also, please consider subscribing. I just started this channel recently, so it's a huge motivation to see a lot of new subscribers. Talk to you later. Bye bye.